Hello and welcome to the SRM Cyber Intelligence Briefing, a podcast that's meant to bring you news and insights straight from our experts. My name is Saad and Nabeel, and I'll be your host for this special podcast series. Over the next couple episodes, I'll be speaking to our experts within the cyber incident response team here at SRM about the latest trends and developments that we've seen across the cyber threat landscape. I'd like to introduce you to our first guest, Tim Geschwindt, a senior associate in our incident response practice here at SRM. Hi, Tim. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Saad. It's a pleasure to be here and join you for this first episode and speak about something quite interesting that we've seen over the last few weeks.
All right, so let's get straight into it, Tim. We've worked on a few interesting cases over the last couple of weeks revolving around business email compromises. So for the sake of clarity, why don't you maybe give us a high-level overview of what a business email compromise actually is?
Yeah, sure. So what we're seeing essentially is cases involving unauthorized intrusions in corporate email accounts. So that describes business email compromise, also referred to as BEC for short.
And what does a threat actor mean to gain from compromising an account?
Good question. So we're seeing two primary objectives. The first really relates to fraudulent payments. So threat actors are gaining unauthorized access to a mailbox, and then they are using that unauthorized mailbox to impersonate someone and try and trick someone else into changing some payment details. Maybe it's details on an invoice or account details changes, which ultimately results in the redirection of a payment. That's the first objective. The second objective that we're seeing a lot at the moment is really getting into an account to use that as a platform for a phishing attack. So we're seeing users receiving phishing emails, they're clicking on them, those accounts are getting compromised, and then the threat actor is getting into that email account and sending another phishing email to all the external contacts of the victim.
So essentially, the second stage, as you described, is basically the threat actor trying to expand their botnet of spam machines.
That's a very good way of describing it, yeah.
So I understand that MFA is a security control that is commonly used to protect your accounts from unauthorized access. I mean, you have a code that's generated and sent to you either by SMS or directly on an app that you might have on your phone. You enter your credentials and then it prompts you for that secret code, it lets you into your account, and in theory, you should only have access to this device. Now, what's interesting about this new method that we've observed is the fact that threat actors are bypassing MFA. So can you go into a little bit of detail of how this is actually being done?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, MFA is the key security control that blocks people from gaining unauthorized access to an account. What we're seeing in this spate of incidents is the involvement of a new phishing toolkit called EvilProxy. Now, EvilProxy is what we call phishing-as-a-service. So threat actors can hire it on the dark web. And what it does is it allows a very entry-level threat actor to bypass MFA in a way that only sophisticated threat actors used to be able to do. Now, the way they do this is by staging what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. So a user receives a phishing link, they click on the link, it opens a phishing page. Typically, the phishing page would be a fraudulent page created by a threat actor. It's not legitimate. You enter your credentials and they are sent to the threat actor's server. In this case, the threat actor presents you with a login page. That is in fact the real login page, but they are proxying or redirecting the traffic from the legitimate service to the user and back again, but they're sitting in the middle. And so what happens is the threat actor watches as the victim enters their password, their username, and then they're asked for their MFA code. As they enter the MFA code, it passes through the threat actor's server and then goes to Microsoft, where Microsoft thinks correct username, correct password, correct MFA code, and sends back an authenticated session cookie. That is intercepted also by the threat actor, who still is sitting in the middle. And once you've harvested the authenticated session cookie, you can now pretend you are that authenticated user in your own browser by injecting that session cookie into your own session. So essentially, to break it down, EvilProxy is allowing a threat actor to intercept an MFA code, use it and then log in as if they had access to the individual's device, where maybe, as you said, an authenticator code or an SMS was sent to that individual.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting and obviously deeply concerning, because the level of sophistication is still quite high. However, the barrier to entry is extremely low right now, right? Like any, let's say, beginner threat actor can actually use this service if they want to.
That is a very good point. And that is one of the three reasons we're quite concerned here. So, as you mentioned, the first is this low barrier to entry. There are tutorials on YouTube, there are write-ups already, and basically any script kiddie or hacktivist or anyone dabbling in the malicious side of cybersecurity can use this phishing-as-a-service kit and bypass MFA. That low barrier to entry, as you mentioned, is a high risk. The second is that we are finding that there's complacency in the market. MFA has been marketed as a silver bullet for preventing unauthorized access to accounts. And so for many companies, that's that. It's a silver bullet and it prevents the risk. Unfortunately, in this case, that means that a lot of the other security controls that you may have considered wrapping around your email security were simply not implemented because MFA would prevent everything. That would be the second key driver behind why we're concerned. The third is we are concerned when we see a theoretical risk manifest itself in the wild, as we refer to it. What we're seeing here is EvilProxy is being used in attacks. It's fair to say that we knew about EvilProxy in early September when we noticed it first become available on the dark web, but the utilization of this new tool in widespread attacks is what's driving the concern for us at SRM.
Right, understandable. I mean, it's such an easy thing to fall for as well because it's so well crafted. So all that is really interesting, yet deeply concerning. How would I, as an individual or a company, go about detecting something like this? How would I know that an EvilProxy campaign is targeting my company?
Good question. It's going to resort to your logging. So, of course, this depends whether you're an Office 365 cloud native company or Google Workspace, etc. But on the assumption it's Microsoft centric, what you're looking for is your unified audit logs. So in Office 365, they have a detailed logging schema, which basically records all user activity across different accounts in Microsoft. If this has been enabled, and it is critical that it's been enabled, you should be able to look at 90 days worth of history of user activity. Now, if those logs are enabled, we do recommend looking for 4 different things. So the first is suspicious logins from locations that does not align with how your business functions. So for some companies, this might look like a login from a specific geography that they do not have business operations in. For other companies where they may have a globally dispersed workforce and a specific nation may not trigger off alarm bells, potentially look for logins from different geographies within a short time frame, which would be suggestive of unauthorized access to the mailbox. That would be the first method. The second is looking at what we call user agent strings in the unified audit logs. What a user agent essentially tells you is it's a fingerprint of the device that was used to log in. Now, what we're noticing in EvilProxy breaches is the initial login comes from a user agent which says postman runtime, which is actually evidence of that session cookie injection method we mentioned earlier. And that's something to look for. If you see postman runtime in the user agent string, you should interrogate that login. The third is you're looking for email rules. Once a threat actor gets into the mailbox, what they're going to want to do is set up an email rule that maybe diverts or hides some sort of email traffic. What we're looking at the moment is threat actors logging in and immediately setting a rule where all incoming mail to their mailbox is redirected to a spam folder. Why? Well, you want to present to the legitimate user that there's nothing wrong in the mailbox. Naturally, if they're getting lots of bounce back email replies or responses like, is this phishing email legitimate? They're going to realize that they've sent out, well, not they, but the threat actor using their account has sent out mail on behalf of the user and therefore understand the attack is taking place. And then last but not least, we're looking for strange activity from your employees. Typically what you're going to be looking for is, has anyone requested changes to banking details, editing of invoices? Anything to do with changes to financial information should be interrogated, and interrogated thoroughly to try and identify whether this is a legitimate request or not.
All right, Tim, thanks for detailing the detection mechanisms in place. It's nice to know that they exist. However, I can imagine it's still extremely difficult to enforce something like this. With that being said, before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you another question, or final question. How can I protect myself from a threat actor bypassing MFA using EvilProxy?
Really good question. And unfortunately, there's no great answer here. EvilProxy, by the nature of the tool that it is, and the technique that it uses, is the latest development in the ongoing arms race, really, between cyber criminals and the defenders. And really, the four things that I'm about to mention, while useful, are by no means a silver bullet. And I think heightened vigilance and an understanding of the threat landscape is required for all organizations to not just necessarily prevent EvilProxy, but making sure that other tools and techniques which are similar are also prevented from being successful. The four things that you might consider to prevent the success of an EvilProxy bypass attempt is, number one, it's all around the MFA type. So typically an organization might use an SMS code, an authenticator app, something along those lines. However, there are MFA setups that use something called hardware tokens. This might look like something akin to a USB, where you'll enter your username, you'll enter your password, and then you'll be requested to enter that hardware token, usually in the USB port on your corporate device, and that is the second factor of authentication. Naturally, a threat actor trying the EvilProxy style man-in-the-middle attack will not be able to access your hardware token, your actual physical key, and therefore that method of multi-factor authentication is certainly a lot better than the password-esque or passcode-esque setups that we typically see in place. So that's number one. Number two is really around mobile device management. So in Office 365 or in Microsoft-centric environments, you may use something called Microsoft Intune, which is a mobile device management tool that can allow you to implement policies, conditional access policies, and the like, to determine whether the device is actually a trusted device or an untrusted device. So if a threat actor is logging in from a laptop, maybe in Mexico or in Russia or in South Africa, if the device they're logging in from has not been enrolled in that mobile device management tool, the login is going to fail. However, there are some operational issues regarding the rollout of mobile device management tools. Sometimes in some organizations, you may still be using your personal device, and often individuals are still requiring to log in through a web browser, through Outlook web access. And in that case, maybe Microsoft Intune is not the tool for you. So that would be point two. Point three really is a more philosophical shift away from passwords. Passwords are inherently quite easy to bypass, and so MFA simply layers on top of that password model. And so the third point, or third recommendation, really is considering moving away from passwords entirely and looking at alternatives like Windows Hello for Business and other passwordless authentication mechanisms. And then lastly, it comes down to human error, Saad, as I'm sure you were expecting. Phishing still relies on someone clicking a malicious link, a phishing page being loaded, and not recognizing that the link in this case is malicious. It's not the legitimate Microsoft login link. Unfortunately, it still comes down to not clicking on the link. And so we still recommend user security awareness training and phishing simulations at regular intervals throughout the year to constantly test your workforce to make sure that they are still vigilant and they are still operating aligned with best practice, which is reporting suspicious links, and if in doubt, send it to IT and let them figure out whether it's phishing or not. Unfortunately, the level of sophistication here means that these phishing pages and phishing sites are extremely convincing. And so, although user security awareness training will go a long way, it's unlikely to prevent everyone from clicking on every link. And so, as I mentioned, while these 4 are good recommendations and things to consider, unfortunately, they are by no means a silver bullet, and EvilProxy will continue to pose quite a significant risk over the next few months as organizations still come to grips with the fact that they are facing a new risk in an altered threat landscape.
Awesome, Tim. Thanks so much for detailing that. And I think it's important to also understand that I think no attack is always preventable. Like there's always going to be a way a threat actor gets into an environment or into an account, and it's just a cat and mouse game, right? We see an attack and then we try to patch it, we try to mitigate it, and then there's another way around. So I want to thank you for joining me on this podcast today. It's the first of its kind here in the Netherlands office, so I think that's it's worth celebrating. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and well, I'll see you tomorrow for sure.
Thank you, Saad.